This story is designed for English listening practice. We will focus on legal vocabulary and high-tension pacing while exploring the lesson that financial boundaries must be guarded, even against family. Let's begin. I stood in the center of the kitchen with the afternoon sun cutting across the island counter. The house was quiet, a silence that usually brought me peace after a long week at the office. But today the silence felt heavy and thick. In my hand, I held a thick envelope that had arrived by registered mail. It required a signature to receive, which I had given the carrier only moments ago. The return address was for a financial institution that held our primary mortgage, a bank we had used for 10 years without issue. I assumed it was a standard update on our interest rate or perhaps a promotional offer they had disguised as urgent business. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. The sound of ripping paper was startlingly loud in the empty room. I pulled out a stack of 3 crisp pages stapled together at the top left corner. The document title made my breath catch in my throat. It was a request for a secondary line of credit, secured against the equity of our home. I read the amount. It was substantial. It was enough to buy a luxury car or fund a small business. I had never requested this. Mark and I had agreed years ago that our equity was for retirement only. I scanned the paragraphs, looking for a mistake, hoping this was a draft or a proposal sent in error. Then my eyes dropped to the bottom of the second page. There were 2 signature lines. One was for Mark. His signature was there, bold and familiar with the heavy loop on the capital letter. Beside it was the line for the co-borrower. My name was printed in black type. Above my printed name was a signature. It read Rachel. I stared at the ink. It was blue ballpoint, just like Mark's. The handwriting looked terrifyingly similar to my own. The way the capital letter curved was right. The sharp finish on the final letter was right. If a stranger looked at this, they would swear I had signed it. But I knew I had not. I looked at the date next to the signature. It was dated for the previous Tuesday. On Tuesday, I had been in a regional meeting 3 hours away from the city. I had the parking receipts and the train ticket to prove it. I could not have been here to sign this paper. I felt a cold wave wash over my skin. This was not a clerical error. This was a forgery. I brought the paper closer to my face. I could see a tiny hesitation in the ink flow on the first letter of my name. It was a microscopic pause, the kind that happens when a hand is tracing a line rather than flowing through it naturally. Someone had copied my signature. Someone had practiced it until it looked perfect enough to pass a casual inspection. The realization made me dizzy. This document had been approved. The bank had stamped it as received. The money was likely already moving or ready to be moved. I felt a sudden spike of nausea. Who had access to our financial files to find a sample of my signature? Who had the opportunity to intercept the mail if the bank had sent a confirmation earlier? Mark handled the mail. Mark had been home on Tuesday. But Mark would never do this alone. He was not detailed enough to pull off a forgery this precise. He would need help. I thought of who else had been in the house lately. My sister, Jenna. She had been staying in the guest room for 2 weeks while her apartment underwent renovations. Jenna, who was an artist. Jenna, who had excellent hand-eye coordination. Jenna, who had mentioned money troubles 3 times in the last month. The room suddenly felt very small. I looked at the kitchen clock. Mark was due home in 20 minutes. Jenna was out picking up groceries and would return any second. I heard the distinct sound of a car door closing in the driveway. It was too soon. I was not ready to confront them. I needed to hide this evidence before they saw that I had intercepted it. If they knew I had the document, they might come up with a cover story or, worse, destroy it. I needed to keep this advantage. I looked around the kitchen frantically. The counters were clear. I could not leave it out. I heard the key slide into the front door lock. The tumbler clicked. I folded the thick document in half and shoved it deep into the bottom of the cereal box in the pantry, pushing it down beneath the grain, just as the front door swung open. Jenna walked into the kitchen carrying 2 brown paper grocery bags. She kicked the door shut behind her with her heel. She was humming a soft, shapeless tune. The kind people hum when they are entirely comfortable in a space that belongs to someone else. She set the bags down on the island, inches away from the spot where I had been standing with the forged document moments before. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I forced my hands to pick up a dish towel and wipe a clean spot on the counter, just to give my trembling fingers something to do. Jenna smiled at me, a bright and easy expression that did not quite reach her eyes. She started pulling items out of the bags. She had bought the expensive brand of coffee I usually avoided, and a block of imported cheese. She was spending money freely, assuming I would cover the household costs as usual. She asked if any mail had come today. The question was casual, tossed out while she examined a carton of eggs. But the timing was too precise. I froze mid-wipe. I told her I had not checked the box yet. I lied. I wanted to see if she would push. She paused for a fraction of a second, her hand hovering over the egg carton. She said she thought she heard the mail carrier's truck earlier. I shrugged and said I must have been in the bathroom. I watched her face carefully. A tiny flicker of annoyance crossed her features before she smoothed it away with another smile. She said she would go check it for me after she put the milk away. She was eager to get to that mailbox. She wanted to intercept whatever had arrived. I realized then that she was the gatekeeper of my own home. Mark arrived home an hour later. The atmosphere in the house shifted the moment he walked in. He carried a frantic energy, a sort of performative stress that he wore like a heavy coat. He kissed my cheek, but his eyes were scanning the room. He tossed his keys into the bowl by the door and immediately asked if I had remembered to call the insurance agent about the car renewal. I frowned. I had called them 2 days ago. I had written the confirmation number on the notepad by the fridge. I pointed to the pad. The page was blank. The top sheet had been torn off. Mark sighed. A loud, exaggerated exhale that signaled disappointed patience. He told me he knew I was tired, but this was important. He said I had promised to do it, and now we might face a penalty. I argued back. I remembered the conversation. I remembered the agent's name was Sarah. I remembered the confirmation code started with a letter T. Mark shook his head. He looked at Jenna. Jenna was chopping vegetables at the sink. She turned and gave me a look of pity. She said she remembered me talking about calling, but then I had gotten distracted by a work email and never made the dial. She said I had written a grocery list on the notepad, not a confirmation number. The two of them stood there, united in their version of reality. My memory against their witness testimony. I felt a seed of doubt plant itself in my stomach. Had I imagined the call? No. I remembered the hold music, but their certainty was a wall I could not break down. Later that evening, the dynamic grew worse. We were sitting in the living room. I was trying to read a book, but I was actually watching them over the top of the pages. Mark was on his laptop. Jenna was sketching in a notebook. Mark looked up and asked where I had put the property tax assessment that came last week. He needed to file it. I told him it was in the blue folder in the filing cabinet, where I put all official house documents. He went to the office. I heard drawers opening and slamming shut. He called out that it was not there. I got up, frustration rising in my chest, and walked to the office. I pulled open the drawer. The blue folder was empty. I stared into the hanging file. I knew I had placed the thick envelope there on Saturday morning. Mark stood in the doorway, crossing his arms. He asked if I had maybe thrown it out with the junk mail. He said I had been throwing a lot of things out lately without looking. He used a soft, concerned voice that made my skin crawl. He said he was worried about my focus. He said he had noticed I was forgetting conversations and misplacing items more frequently in the last month. He suggested I might be burning out at work. He suggested I might need to hand over the household administration to him for a while, just until I felt more like myself. Jenna appeared in the hallway behind him. She nodded in agreement. She said she had found her own sweater in the laundry hamper when I had borrowed it, and promised to dry clean it. She said she found my car keys in the refrigerator yesterday. I spun around to face her. I had never put keys in the refrigerator in my life. That was absurd. But she held my gaze with perfect innocence. She said she didn't mention it because she didn't want to embarrass me, but since Mark brought it up, she thought I should know. They were building a case. They were cataloging a list of errors I had never made. The next morning, I decided to test my own mind. I woke up early, before either of them. I took my travel mug and placed it specifically on the third shelf of the cabinet, behind the water glasses. I took a photo of it with my phone. I time-stamped the photo. Then I went to shower. When I came back downstairs, Mark was pouring coffee. I went to the cabinet. The mug was gone. I looked around. It was sitting in the sink, filled with soapy water. Mark looked at me and said he had found it left out on the patio table outside, where it was attracting ants. He asked why I was leaving dishes outside overnight. I opened my mouth to scream that I had just put it in the cabinet 20 minutes ago. Then I stopped. If I argued, I would sound crazy. I would sound like I was losing my grip on reality. If I showed him the photo, he would claim I moved it after the photo. Or worse, he would know I was tracking them. I needed to play the role they had written for me. I rubbed my temple and apologized. I said I must have been sleepwalking. I saw a look pass between Mark and Jenna. It was a look of satisfaction. It was the look of two people who were successfully moving a heavy object exactly where they wanted it to go. The gaslighting intensified over the weekend. I started finding my personal items in Jenna's room, and she would claim I had lent them to her and forgotten. I found important letters opened and resealed with tape. But when I pointed it out, Mark said the adhesive was just old and failing. They were eroding my confidence in my own senses, but the cereal box remained my anchor. Every time they made me doubt myself, I would wait until the house was empty, reach into the grain, and touch the folded paper. The forgery was real. The ink was real. Therefore, I was sane. Their lies were the only thing that was broken. On Sunday afternoon, Jenna offered to help organize the office. She said the clutter was probably why I was losing things. She said a clean space would help my mind clarity. I told her no. I was firm. I said I preferred my own system. She pushed. She said she just wanted to be helpful since she was staying rent-free. She reached for a stack of bank statements on the desk. I snatched them away from her hand a little too quickly. The paper made a sharp snapping sound. Jenna recoiled, looking hurt. Mark looked up from his computer with a frown. He asked why I was being so aggressive. He said Jenna was only trying to assist me. I forced a smile. I said I was sorry, but I had sensitive client information in my office and could not have anyone else touching my papers. It was a weak excuse. Mark knew I kept client files at my work office, not here. He narrowed his eyes. He asked if I was hiding something. The irony of the question almost made me laugh. He was the one hiding a 6-figure loan. He was the one hiding a betrayal. But he turned the accusation on me. He said my behavior was becoming erratic. He said I was paranoid. That night, I overheard them talking in the garage. I was in the laundry room, which shared a wall with the garage. The insulation was thin. I pressed my ear against the drywall. Mark's voice was low and tense. He asked if it was done. Jenna replied that she needed one more document to complete the file. She said she couldn't find the passport. My passport. I felt a cold chill. They weren't just taking a loan. They were preparing for something that required my identity documentation. Mark told her to look in the safe when I went to work on Monday. He said he would distract me with a text message if I came home early. I backed away from the wall. My passport was in the small safe in the closet. The safe required a combination. Only Mark and I knew it. But if Mark was working with her, she had the code. I went upstairs and checked the safe. It was locked. I opened it. The passport was there. But next to it, I noticed something disturbing. The small box where I kept my spare car key was empty. The key was gone. I never used that key. It was for emergencies. Why would they need my car key? Unless they planned to take my car. Or unless they wanted to stage an accident. No. That was too violent. They wanted something else. They wanted to sell it? Or maybe they wanted to plant it somewhere. I put the passport in my pocket. I could not leave it there. But then I stopped. If I took it, they would know I was onto them. They would know I was securing my assets. I had to leave it, or replace it with a decoy. I didn't have a decoy. I put the passport back. I had to be smarter than simply grabbing things and running. I had to let them think they were winning until I had enough proof to crush them. The next morning, Mark brought up the idea of a power of attorney. He said it casually over breakfast. He said since I was struggling with stress and memory, maybe we should sign a limited power of attorney so he could handle the bills and legal matters without bothering me. He said it was just a safety net. He said we could revoke it any time. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was already typed up. It gave him full control over my medical and financial decisions. He held out a pen. He smiled. A warm, reassuring husband smile. He said, "Just sign it, honey. Let me take the burden off you." I looked at the pen. I looked at his face. I looked at Jenna, who was watching from the doorway with a mug of tea in her hands. She gave me a supportive nod. They were closing the trap. If I signed this, the forgery wouldn't matter anymore. He would have legal permission to drain everything. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking. I feigned a sudden coughing fit. I dropped the pen. I grabbed my chest and said I felt sick. I said I needed water. I ran to the sink. I told them I couldn't focus right now. I needed to get to work. I left the paper unsigned on the table. As I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, Mark called out. He said we would sign it tonight. He said he would have a notary come by the house so we could get it done properly. A notary? That meant they had someone on their side, or they had fooled a professional. I walked to my car, my legs feeling like lead. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the house. It looked the same as always. But inside, it was a theater of lies. I checked my rear-view mirror. Jenna was watching me from the front window. She was on her phone. She was reporting my departure. I needed to escalate my defense. I needed to stop reacting and start investigating. They thought I was the confused, forgetful wife. They thought I was losing my mind. I started the engine. I would let them think that. I would be the most confused, forgetful witness they had ever seen. Until I had everything I needed. I pulled out of the driveway. But I didn't go to work. I drove 2 streets over and parked behind a line of hedges where I could see the exit of our subdivision. I waited. 10 minutes later, my car passed me. Jenna was driving it. She had the spare key. I watched my own silver sedan turn left at the stop sign, merging smoothly into the mid-morning traffic. Jenna was driving with the window down, her elbow resting on the ledge, looking relaxed and confident in a vehicle that did not belong to her. Seeing her in my driver's seat was a violation that hit harder than the missing coffee mug. That car was my sanctuary, the one place where I listened to my podcasts and decompressed after work. Now she had invaded that space too. I checked the time on my dashboard clock. It was 9:15. She should have been at the house, working on her portfolio, as she claimed to do every day. Instead, she was running an errand with my car, while I was supposedly safely at my office. I needed to know where she was going. I waited 3 cars' lengths, and then pulled out to follow her. I kept a safe distance, thankful that my rental car for the day I had told Mark my car was in the shop for a brake check, a lie I had planted yesterday to explain why I would be driving a generic white compact allowed me to blend in perfectly. Jenna drove toward the commercial district, bypassing the grocery stores and the shopping mall. She turned into the parking lot of a large office complex that housed medical specialists and legal firms. She parked in a visitor spot and walked briskly toward the entrance of a building I recognized. It was the office of our family attorney, the man who held our wills and our property deeds. I felt a surge of panic. If she was meeting with our lawyer, she could be trying to access documents or change beneficiaries. But she wasn't me. She couldn't just walk in and impersonate me face to face. Unless she wasn't pretending to be me, unless she was pretending to be my authorized representative, I watched her enter the building. I couldn't follow her inside. The risk of being seen was too high. I took out my phone and opened the banking app for our joint account. I refreshed the transaction history. Nothing new. Then I checked my personal credit card, the one I rarely used. There was a pending charge from 2 hours ago. It was for a rush processing fee at a Vital Records website. Someone had ordered a copy of a birth certificate. My birth certificate. My stomach dropped. With a birth certificate and the marriage license they could easily access in the house, they could build a full identity profile. They weren't just taking money, they were preparing to make major legal changes that required primary identification. I sat in the hot car, sweat gathering at my hairline. I needed to get back into the house while it was empty. I needed to see what was on Mark's computer. I drove back to the house, speeding slightly. I parked the rental car 3 blocks away and walked through the neighbor's wooded path to approach our backyard. The house was silent. I used my key to open the back door, wincing at the noise of the deadbolt. I went straight to Mark's home office. His laptop was closed on the desk. I opened it. It was password protected. Mark had never password protected his home computer before. We had an open device policy. I tried his usual password, his favorite baseball team, and his jersey number. Incorrect. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. I looked around the desk for a sticky note. Mark was terrible with passwords. He always wrote them down. I lifted the keyboard. Nothing. I checked under the mouse pad. Nothing. I opened the top drawer. It was organized, too organized. The messy pile of receipts that usually lived there was gone. In its place was a neat stack of manila envelopes. I opened the top one. It contained medical brochures. Early onset dementia. Signs and support. Power of attorney for incapacitated spouses. Long-term care facilities in the tri-state area. The room spun. They weren't just stealing from me. They were building a narrative that I was mentally incompetent. They were planning to have me declared unfit. That explained the gaslighting. That explained the missing items and the forgotten conversations. If Mark could get a doctor to sign off on my decline, he would get control of everything without needing to forge another signature. He could legally sell the house, access my retirement funds, and dissolve our assets to pay for my care. And Jenna? She would be the supportive sister helping him through the tragedy. I heard the front door open. My heart stopped. I hadn't heard a car pull up. I must have been too focused on the papers. Heavy footsteps walked across the foyer tiles. It was Mark. He was home for lunch, something he almost never did. I was trapped in the office. There was no other exit except the window, and the screen was painted shut. I quickly shoved the brochures back into the envelope and placed it in the drawer. I closed the laptop. I looked for a place to hide. The closet was full of boxes. Under the desk was too visible. "Jenna?" Mark called out. I forgot my badge. He was walking toward the kitchen. I had seconds. I slipped off my shoes and tiptoed to the doorway, pressing my back against the frame. I could see his reflection in the hallway mirror. He was heading for the kitchen counter. He grabbed his ID badge, which was sitting by the coffee maker. Then he paused. He looked at the floor. I followed his gaze. There, on the hardwood, was a small smudge of mud. My mud, from the backyard path. Mark crouched down and touched the mud. He frowned. He stood up and looked down the hallway, directly toward the office. I held my breath, my lungs burning. He took a step toward me. "Hello?" he called out. His voice was sharp, suspicious. I needed a distraction. I remembered I had left my phone in my purse on the desk. I prayed it was on silent. Suddenly, the landline in the kitchen rang. Mark jumped. He turned back to answer it. It was a spam call, the automated kind we got 5 times a day. He cursed and hung up. He looked at his watch. He was running late. He turned and walked out the front door, locking it behind him. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob. I waited 2 full minutes to make sure he was gone. Then, I ran to the desk. I needed to install a keylogger. I had bought a small USB device online 2 days ago, a piece of spy tech I never thought I'd use. I plugged it into the back of his desktop tower, hidden among the other cables. It would record every keystroke he made, every password, every email draft, every search query. I also placed a small, battery-operated voice recorder under the bookshelf, taped to the underside of the bottom shelf. I left the house, wiping the mud from the floor with a tissue from my pocket. I drove back to work, my hands shaking on the wheel. When I walked into my office, my assistant looked concerned. She said I looked pale. I told her I had a migraine. I closed my door and logged into my health insurance portal. I needed to see if they had changed anything there. I navigated to the profile section. My primary contact email had been changed. It was now an email address I didn't recognize. m.r.ca.re.admin@gmail.com. My emergency contact had been changed from my mother to Jenna, and there was a request pending approval. A request to authorize a new specialist to access my records. The specialist was a geriatric psychiatrist, known for competency hearings. I printed the screen. This was concrete. This wasn't a misplaced key or a forgotten conversation. This was digital evidence of unauthorized account tampering. I created a new folder on my work drive, password protected, and hidden deep in a subdirectory of archived projects. I named it Project Blue. I scanned the printout and saved it there. That evening, the atmosphere at home was suffocating. Mark was exceptionally nice. He cooked dinner. He poured me wine. He asked about my day with a tenderness that made me want to scream. Jenna sat across from me, smiling her shark smile. "Rachel, you seem a bit on edge tonight," Mark said, cutting into a steak. "Is everything okay?" "I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just tired." "We were thinking," Jenna said, leaning forward, "maybe you should take a sabbatical. Just a month or 2. We could go up to the lake house. Just relax. No work, no stress." The lake house. It was isolated. No cell service. Miles from the nearest neighbor. If they got me there, I would be completely cut off. "That sounds nice," I lied. "But I have a big project to finish first. Work is always the priority, isn't it?" Mark said, a hard edge entering his voice. "That's part of the problem, Rachel. You're prioritizing work over your health. We're seeing the toll it's taking." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. He set it on the table. "I picked these up for you today," he said. "Dr. Evans called it in. It's just a mild anti-anxiety medication. To help you sleep. To help the fog clear. I stared at the bottle. I had never seen Dr. Evans. I had never asked for medication. I didn't see Dr. Evans, I said slowly. You did, honey, Mark said gently. Last week. Don't you remember? You went on your lunch break. You called me afterwards and said you were scared about how confused you felt. He looked at Jenna. Jenna nodded. I remember too, Rachel. You told me about it when you got home. My blood ran cold. They were rewriting history in real time. And now they were trying to drug me. If I took those pills, times would be foggy. Times would be confused. And if they overdosed me? Or if the pills interacted with something? I don't remember that, I said, pushing my chair back. See? Mark said, his voice dripping with sad validation. This is exactly what we're talking about. The memory gaps are getting worse. He pushed the bottle toward me. Just take one tonight. Please. For me. I took the bottle. I had to. If I refused, I was being non-compliant. I looked at the label. It had my name. It had today's date. It was a real prescription. He must have called it in claiming to be me. Or used a doctor friend. Okay, I said. I'll take it before bed. I went upstairs. I went into the bathroom and turned on the tap. I opened the bottle. The pills were small and white. I flushed one down the toilet. I hid the bottle in the back of the medicine cabinet. I would not take a single one, but I would pretend I did. The next morning, I acted groggy. I moved slower. I let my speech slur slightly. Mark watched me with satisfaction. Did you sleep better? He asked. Yes, I murmured. Deep sleep. Very deep. Good, he said. The pills are working. I went to work. I checked the keylogger data remotely. Mark had been busy last night. The logs showed he had searched for how fast does benzodiazepine leave the system and competency hearing timeline state of New York. He had also emailed a realtor. The subject line was listing inquiry. Urgent. He was preparing to sell the house the moment he got power of attorney. I needed to move faster. I needed to catch them discussing the plan explicitly. The voice recorder under the shelf might have something. I waited until they were both out of the house, midday Mark at work. Jenna at her art class, and rushed home. I retrieved the recorder and plugged it into my laptop. I fast-forwarded through hours of silence. Then, voices. Mark. She took the pill. She looked wrecked this morning. Jenna. Good. How long until we can get the evaluation? Mark. I have the appointment set for Friday. We just need to keep her dosed until then. Make sure she misses the quarterly meeting at work tomorrow. If she misses that, her boss will document it. It adds to the file. Jenna. I'll turn off her alarm, and I'll delete the calendar invite from her phone. Mark. Perfect. And the bank transfer? Jenna. Scheduled. The moment the power of attorney is signed, the funds move to the offshore shell. By the time anyone notices, the money is gone, and she's in a facility. I froze. Friday. That was in 3 days. And tomorrow was the quarterly meeting. It was the most important meeting of the year. If I missed it, it would be catastrophic for my career, and would perfectly support their claim that I was incompetent. I checked my phone. The calendar invite was gone. I checked my alarm settings. All alarms were deleted. Jenna had already done it. She must have known my passcode. I changed my passcode immediately. Then I changed it back. If they couldn't get into my phone, they would know I was onto them. I had to let them think their sabotage was working. I re-added the meeting to my calendar but set it to private, so it just showed as busy. I set a silent vibration alarm on my fitness watch, which they never checked. That night, Jenna made tea. For your nerves, she said. I watched her stir it. I saw a tiny white residue on the spoon. She was crushing the pills into the tea. Thanks, Jenna, I said. You're so thoughtful. I took the mug. I walked to the living room. I pretended to sip. I waited until she looked away at the TV, then poured a quarter of it into the potted fern in the corner. I did this 4 times over the course of the hour. When the mug was empty, I staged a yawn. I'm so tired, I said. Those pills really knock me out. Go to bed, Rachel, Mark said soothingly. We'll handle everything down here. I went upstairs. I lay in bed, fully dressed under the covers. Listening. I heard them clinking glasses downstairs. They were celebrating prematurely. The next morning, I woke up to my wrist vibrating. It was 6 a.m. The house was silent. My phone alarm did not go off. I got up quietly. I dressed in my best suit. I did my makeup to look sharp, alert, and powerful. I waited until 7:30 a.m., the time I would normally be rushing if I had overslept. I walked downstairs. Mark and Jenna were in the kitchen, drinking coffee, looking relaxed. When I walked in, fully ready and looking sharper than I had in weeks, their faces dropped. Jenna actually spilled coffee on the counter. Rachel? Mark stammered. I thought you were sleeping in. I woke up feeling great, I said, grabbing an apple. The fog completely lifted. Must be a miracle. I stared at them. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel the fear. I wanted them to wonder if the pills were duds, or if I was stronger than they thought. I have a big meeting, I said. Don't wait up. I walked out the door. I had won the skirmish. But the war was coming on Friday. The appointment. I needed to know where it was. I checked the keylogger again. Mark had received a confirmation email. Dr. Eris, 200 Main Street. Suite 404. Friday at 2 p.m. I had a plan. I wasn't going to that appointment to be evaluated. I was going to turn the tables. But first, I needed to secure the money. They mentioned an offshore shell. I needed the account number. I needed to find where Mark had written it down. He wouldn't trust a digital file for that. He was old school about the biggest secrets. It would be on paper. I thought about his habits. When he was stressed, he read. He read old thrillers. There was a specific book he had been reading lately. The Stark Divide. It was on his nightstand. I waited until Wednesday. Mark was in the shower. I slipped into the bedroom. I picked up the book. I fanned the pages. Nothing. I shook it. Nothing. I felt the spine. It felt thick. I looked closely at the binding. The dust jacket was loose. I slid the dust jacket off. On the inside of the paper jacket, written in faint pencil, was a string of numbers, a routing number, an account number, and a Swift code. Cayman Islands. I took a photo. I slid the jacket back on. I placed the book exactly as it was. I had the destination. Now, I needed to prove the origin. I needed to link the forged loan document to this account. I needed to find the transfer request form. I went back to the keylogger logs. Mark had printed a document on Monday evening. Wire, transfer, auth. PDF. He must have the physical copy signed and ready to go. Where would he keep a document worth $500,000? Not in the desk. Not in the safe. He would keep it on his person. Or in his car. I checked his briefcase while he was dressing. Nothing. I checked his glove box. Nothing. Then I remembered the spare tire well in his trunk. Years ago, when we went on road trips, he used to hide emergency cash there. It was his go-to hiding spot. I waited until he was asleep that night. I took his keys. I went out to the driveway. I opened his trunk. I lifted the carpet. I unscrewed the tire cover. There, taped to the rim of the spare tire, was a plastic Ziploc bag. Inside was the wire transfer form. Signed by Rachel. Dated for this coming Friday. I took the bag. I replaced it with a similar bag, containing a folded piece of blank paper. I screwed the cover back. I locked the car. I had the smoking gun, but as I walked back to the house, I saw a light flick on in the upstairs window. Jenna's room. She was awake. Had she seen me? I froze in the shadows of the driveway. I saw her silhouette move to the window. She pressed her face against the glass, looking down. I held perfectly still, praying the darkness covered me. After a long minute, she moved away. The light went out. I crept back inside. I hid the Ziploc bag inside the lining of my winter coat in the hall closet. A place they never looked because it was out of season. Thursday passed in a blur of tension. Mark was agitated. He kept checking his phone. Jenna was shadowing me, watching my every move. They sensed something was wrong. They sensed I was too calm. "Are you excited for the weekend?" Jenna asked me, her eyes drilling into mine. "Very," I said. "I think it's going to be a turning point." "It certainly will be," she said. Friday morning arrived. The day of the appointment. Mark told me he was taking me to a special lunch before we went to the spa. That was the cover story. A spa day. "That sounds lovely," I said. We got in the car. Mark drove. Jenna sat in the back. I was in the passenger seat. I had my purse. Inside my purse was my phone, recording, and the Ziploc bag, with the forged transfer. Mark drove toward the medical district. "This isn't the way to the spa," I said innocently. "Just a quick stop first," Mark said. His knuckles were white on the wheel. "To pick up something." He pulled into the parking lot of 200 Main Street. He parked. He turned to me. "Rachel, we're actually here to see a doctor. Just for a quick checkup. We're worried about you." "I see," I said. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. "Come on," Jenna said, reaching for my door handle from the outside. She was flanking me. We walked into the building. We went up the elevator. We walked into suite 404. Dr. Aris was waiting. He was a stern man with gray hair. He shook Mark's hand. "This is the patient?" he asked, looking at me. "Yes," Mark said. "She's very confused. She doesn't know what day it is most of the time." Dr. Aris looked at me. "Do you know what day it is, Rachel?" I smiled. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the Ziploc bag. I placed it on the doctor's desk. "It's Friday," I said clearly. "The day my husband and sister planned to have me committed so they could wire $500,000 to the Cayman Islands using this forged document." Mark's face went pale. Jenna gasped. "What is this?" Dr. Aris asked, looking at the document. "It's a forgery," I said. "And I have the audio recordings of them planning it, and the key logs of him searching for your office, and how to overdose me on sedatives." I turned to Mark. "You should check your spare tire. The bag is empty." Mark lunged for the document. "Give me that." I snatched it back. "I don't think so." "She's lying," Jenna screamed. "She's having an episode. Doctor, grab her." Dr. Aris backed away. He looked from me to Mark. He saw the terror in Mark's eyes. He saw the cold calculation in mine. "I think you should leave," Dr. Aris said to Mark. "Before I call the police." "You don't understand," Mark stammered. "She's sick." "I'm not sick," I said. "I'm the most lucid person in this room." "And Mark? I already sent the copies to the bank's fraud department. And to your boss. And to the police." Mark froze. The color drained from his face completely. He looked at Jenna. Jenna was already backing toward the door. You what?" he whispered. "I sent them 10 minutes ago." I lied. I hadn't sent them yet. I wanted to see him squirm. They're probably on their way here right now. That was the breaking point. Mark didn't check. He didn't think. He panicked. He turned and ran out of the office. Jenna followed him, shoving past the receptionist. I stood there, holding the document. The silence in the room was deafening. "I'm sorry about this," I said to the doctor. "I'll be needing a copy of your notes from this visit, to prove I was here, and that I was perfectly sane." Dr. Eris nodded slowly. "I think that can be arranged." I walked to the window. I watched Mark and Jenna run to the car. They were arguing. Mark was hitting the steering wheel. They peeled out of the parking lot. They were running, which meant they were guilty. And now, the chase was on. I stood at the window of the medical office, watching Mark's sedan weave erratically through the parking lot traffic before disappearing onto the main road. My heart was pounding, a hard, rhythmic thud against my ribs. But my hands were steady. I turned back to Dr. Eris. He was staring at me, his pen hovering over his clipboard, his expression a mix of professional shock and curiosity. He had expected a confused, pliable patient. Instead, he had witnessed a crime scene unfolding in his office. I asked him for a statement, just a simple confirmation that I had appeared lucid and that my family members had fled when confronted with evidence of fraud. He hesitated, then nodded. He typed a brief note, signed it, and handed it to me. It was the first official brick in the wall I was building against them. I left the building and walked to the rental car I had parked a block away. I sat in the driver's seat and let out a long, shaky breath. The confrontation had been the easy part. Now came the hard part. The documentation. I needed to solidify the evidence before they could destroy it or disappear. I drove straight to the bank. Not the branch near our house, but the main downtown headquarters. I asked to speak with a fraud investigator immediately. I laid everything out on the desk. The forged loan application I had retrieved from the cereal box, the wire transfer form from the spare tire, and the printed logs of the keylogger data showing Mark's searches for offshore accounts. The investigator, a woman named Miss Kinsley, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, went through the papers. She stopped at the loan application. She pulled up the digital file on her screen. She zoomed in on the signature. She compared it to the signature card I had signed 10 years ago. She looked at me. She said the match was excellent, but the pressure points were wrong. A machine or a careful hand had done this. She flagged the account instantly. She put a freeze on everything. The checking, the savings, the mortgage line. No money would move in or out without her personal approval. Mark's plan to drain the equity was dead, but I needed more. I needed to understand the why. Greed was obvious, but the desperation in Mark's actions suggested something deeper. Why now? Why the rush? I went back to my office. It was late Friday afternoon. The building was quiet. I logged into the Project Blue folder. I replayed the audio recording from the garage. Jenna had mentioned insurance. I hadn't focused on it before. I searched our home insurance files online. Nothing unusual. Then, I checked life insurance. We had standard policies through Mark's work. But then I found something else. A search of Mark's email archive, accessible through the keylogger history, showed correspondence with a private insurer. A policy had been taken out 6 months ago. The beneficiary was Mark. The insured was me. The payout was $2 million. The clause for payout included accidental death and death due to medical mismanagement. My blood ran cold. The pills, the confusion, the competency hearing. If they had succeeded in getting me declared incompetent and medicated, a fatal accident or a medication error would have looked like a tragic, inevitable conclusion to my decline. They weren't just planning to steal my money, they were hedging a bet on my life. I printed the policy details. I printed the emails where Mark discussed the waiting period for the suicide clause, clarifying that it didn't apply to accidental overdose. The cold calculation was nauseating. This was the man I had shared a bed with for a decade. This was the sister I had helped through art school. They had reduced me to an actuarial table. I needed to secure the house. I couldn't go back there to sleep, but I needed to get the rest of the physical evidence. The voice recorder was still under the shelf. There might be more documents in Jenna's room. I called a locksmith. I told him I had lost my keys and needed the locks changed immediately. I met him at the house at 5 p.m. Mark and Jenna were gone. The house felt abandoned. The air was stale. The locksmith worked quickly. I paid him extra to install a heavy-duty deadbolt on the master bedroom door. Once he left, I went into Jenna's room. It was a mess of clothes and art supplies. I started digging. Under the mattress, I found a notebook. It was a sketchbook, but the back pages were filled with handwriting. It was a timeline. Week 1. Misplace items. Week 2. Sleep deprivation. Week 3. Introduce gaslighting. Week 4. The doctor. It was a script. A literal script for my breakdown. Next to the timeline was a list of costs. Flight to Caymans, condo rental, Mark's debt payoff. Mark's debt. That was the missing piece. I went to Mark's office. I pulled his credit report. It was clean. But his gambling history? I searched the house for a burner phone. I found it taped to the underside of his desk drawer. It was dead. I plugged it in. When it booted up, messages flooded in. They were from a bookie. Mark owed $300,000. The threats were graphic. Pay up or we visit the wife. He wasn't just greedy. He was terrified. He was sacrificing me to save himself from the mob. I took photos of every text message. I bagged the phone. I bagged the sketchbook. I went to the living room and set up a camera. I pointed it at the front door. Then I went into the master bedroom, locked the new deadbolt, and pushed the dresser in front of it. I sat on the bed with my laptop. The physical evidence spread around me like a shield. I backed up every file to a cloud server and emailed the link to my work address and my best friend's email. Around 9 p.m., I heard a car in the driveway. Headlights swept across the ceiling. I checked the camera feed on my phone. It was Mark's car. He and Jenna got out. They looked disheveled. They walked to the front door. Mark tried his key. It didn't turn. He jiggled it. He tried again. He pounded on the door. "Rachel!" he screamed. "Open the goddamn door!" Jenna was pacing behind him. "She changed the locks. She knows Mark. She knows everything. She can't lock me out of my own house!" Mark yelled. He kicked the door. I watched them on the screen. I felt a strange sense of detachment. They looked like strangers. Violent, desperate strangers. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. "I need police assistance," I said calmly. "My husband and his sister are attempting to break into my home. I have a restraining order pending. I fear for my safety." I didn't have a restraining order pending yet, but I would by morning. I watched the screen. Mark went to the window. He tried to pry it open. It was locked. He picked up a garden stone. He was going to smash the glass. "Don't do it, Mark," Jenna hissed. "The neighbors." "I don't care." Mark raised the stone. Blue lights flashed in the driveway. A patrol car pulled up silently. 2 officers stepped out. Mark dropped the stone. He put his hands up. Jenna froze. I went downstairs. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the glass. "Officers," I said. "These people are trespassing. They have threatened my life. I have evidence of fraud and conspiracy inside." The officer looked at Mark. "Sir, is this your residence?" "Yes," Mark shouted. "My wife is having a mental breakdown. She's locked me out. I have a statement from Dr. Eris confirming I am lucid, I said, holding the paper against the glass. And I have a bank freeze order confirming fraud investigation. If he enters this house, he will destroy evidence. The officer looked at the paper. He looked at Mark's frantic state. He looked at the stone on the ground. Sir, the officer said, you need to step away from the door. We'll need to sort this out, but you can't break in. She's crazy, Mark spat. Step away, the officer repeated, his hand resting near his belt. Mark stepped back. He looked at me through the glass. His eyes were pure hate. This isn't over, he mouthed. It is for you, I whispered. They were escorted off the property. The officer told them to stay at a hotel and contact a lawyer. He told me to file the restraining order first thing in the morning. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours organizing the file. The evidence file. It was thick. It was irrefutable. I had the forgery. I had the wire transfer. I had the insurance policy. I had the debt texts. I had the timeline script. I had the doctor's note. I had the bank freeze. I was ready for the legal war. The next 48 hours were a blur of fluorescent lights, legal pads, and the cold echo of official buildings. I didn't go to work on Monday. I went to the courthouse. With Miss Kinsley's fraud report and the police incident number from Friday night, the temporary restraining order was granted before lunch. It barred Mark and Jenna from coming within 500 feet of me, the house, or my workplace. It also legally froze our assets pending a divorce hearing, locking Mark out of every account we shared. He couldn't even buy a sandwich without a paper trail I could see. I met with a high-asset divorce attorney named Mr. Vance in the afternoon. He was a shark in a tailored suit. The kind of lawyer you hire when you want to scorch the earth. I handed him the evidence file. He flipped through the pages silently. When he got to the insurance policy and the death due to medical mismanagement clause, he stopped. He looked up at me over his glasses. He said, "This wasn't just divorce. This was conspiracy to commit murder." He said he would be contacting the district attorney's office. He said Mark and Jenna weren't looking at a settlement. They were looking at prison time. Mr. Vance handled the revocation of the power of attorney documents Mark had tried to file. He sent cease and desist letters to every financial institution. He filed a formal contest of the loan application. He contacted the credit bureaus and put a high-risk fraud alert on my social security number. My identity was now a fortress. No one could open a library card in my name without a thumbprint and a blood sample. I returned to the house one last time on Tuesday. I brought movers. I wasn't staying. The house was a crime scene to me now, tainted by the memories of gaslighting and the ghost of the woman they tried to make me believe I was. I packed my clothes, my books, and the few personal items that mattered. I left the furniture. I left the wedding photos. I left the life we had built. As the movers loaded the truck, I walked through the empty rooms. I felt a profound sense of loss, not for Mark, but for the time I had wasted trusting him. But beneath the grief was a steel core of survival. I had walked into their trap and dismantled it from the inside out. I walked into the kitchen. The notepad was still on the counter. The one Jenna had claimed held a grocery list instead of a confirmation number. I picked up a pen. I wrote a new note. Asterisk. I didn't forget. I was just taking notes. Asterisk. I left it in the center of the island. I moved into a secure apartment in the city, a building with a doorman and cameras in every hallway. I started a new routine. I changed my phone number. I changed my email. I cut ties with mutual friends who hesitated to pick a side. I built a new circle, small and tight, based on earned trust, not history. 6 months later, the legal dust began to settle. The forensic audit of Mark's finances revealed the extent of his gambling addiction. He had been siphoning money for years, hiding it in small withdrawals I had missed because I trusted him to handle the books. Jenna had been his accomplice because he had promised her a cut to pay off her own debts. They turned on each other in the depositions. Mark claimed it was Jenna's idea to drug me. Jenna claimed Mark forced her to do it. The recording from the garage destroyed both their defenses. Mark pleaded guilty to fraud and conspiracy to avoid a longer sentence for attempted harm. He got 8 years. Jenna got 4. The house was sold to pay off the debts and the legal fees. I walked away with my retirement intact and my freedom. I sat in a coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday, watching the people rush by outside. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. A deposit had cleared. My paycheck. I opened the app. I looked at the balance. It was mine. All mine. No shared access. No second signature. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted bitter and clean. I thought about the woman who had stood in that kitchen, confused and trembling, holding a forged letter. She was gone. In her place was someone who checked every detail, who trusted her gut over her heart, and who knew exactly where her keys were. I wasn't just a survivor of a bad marriage, I was the witness who put them away.